Greetings, this is Tanya at I Love Iodine. This is a video of a presentation that I gave February 29th of 2020, just about 6 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. at an event called Routing DC. So before we get started learning a little bit more about wild edible plants, and we're going to be focusing more on ones that are in the Washington, D.C. area, eastern United States, in this presentation, let's talk about why I'm interested in wild plants. I did not come from a background of botany or biology. I got a degree in applied mathematics and also one in research methodology, focusing on the area of educational psychology. But regardless, I became interested in nutrition, and from that parlayed into learning more about wild edible plants. I really enjoy getting out into nature. I feel that learning more about the land in which we live is very, very important. I also like the aspect of getting free food and medicine. I also like how it empowers me to be able to know what I can eat when I'm out hiking or walking. It gives me a sense of confidence in my abilities that I never really had, just from going to school and being in the educational system. And it is kind of a grounding experience. And going out into nature, there's so much mathematics, and just looking at it from that perspective is even just enough. But there's so much more. The aesthetics of nature. You can get into the concepts and the ideas that go with sacred geometry. But looking at it from a more practical standpoint is survival reasons. For thousands of years, our ancestors relied upon these wild foods, in addition to, of course, some of the grains that they were producing in gardening, which has happened for a long time as well, and, of course, raising livestock. But wild foods have always been a very important part, and especially with the medicine. Medicines came from the plants until more recent times. But as we know, going out in nature, it does reduce our stress. It helps keep us calm, and it's very soothing to the soul. So that's a reason in itself. A very important reason for me, and it was how I first got into it, was about the nutrition. I had a nutritional deficiency that I had to overcome because I had a parasitic infection. And I was looking for the best sources of correcting the nutritional deficiency I had. And wild foods are a great way to do it because you're eating food as its freshest at its prime. And it goes a little bit beyond gardening. With gardens, we have to tend to them or they won't survive. These wild plants have a lot of ability to survive, more arid conditions, more extreme conditions in the climate than some of our gardens. A lot of these plants can survive through frost. They can survive through, large variances in temperature and, like I said, extreme amounts of water, or other times where it's a more dry condition. So, but another thing when we're dealing with wild plants, it's a great way that we can help others by the more that we can learn, whether it's learning wild plants or it's skills, we can help others learn these skills, and we can share that knowledge. And I think that's very important, that we focus a lot on community and helping each other learn basic skills that have been lost throughout the last few generations. And as we know, sustainability has become a very big topic in the last few decades, and we really need to focus on that. And if we are foraging in a ethical and sustainable way, we can actually help the environment. If we are making sure that we don't over-harvest threatened or endangered plants, in fact, we shouldn't harvest any of those, but if we don't harvest to the point that plants become that is going to be very beneficial. And also, if we focus on foraging plants that are invasive and we can actually consume them and or use them for medicine, then it is a win-win situation for the environment and for ourselves. So before we get started, if you would like to contact me, you can reach me via email at iloveiodine@gmail.com. I also have a website, and you can reach out to me on that as well. That's www.iloveiodine.com. I have a lot of information on natural living, on products. I'm also have a store on there, if you will, and you can get a few of my ebooks. I'll also be posting soap that I make that's made with all organic oils, essential oils, and natural botanicals. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out in May. That's when those things will be posted. And also there's lots of information on wild plants, on different things about herbs and baking, basically just natural living and natural products. If you'd like a copy of this presentation in PDF form, please go to my website at www.iloveiodine.com/presentations. This PDF of this presentation will be up there and downloadable for free until July 1st of 2020. If you're watching this video after July 1st, please feel free to email me if you would like to get a copy of that, and we can make that happen. So let's cover some definitions. What is foraging? What is wildcrafting? You may have heard of one, you may have heard of both. So let's define them. Foraging is defined as the process or act of searching for and gathering food, medicines, and or provisions from wild sources. Wildcrafting is defined as the practice of harvesting plants from their natural or wild habitat, primarily for food or medicinal purposes. So you may think that foraging equals wildcrafting, and I would agree with you. They're synonymous. I will use them interchangeably, and they mean the same thing for the most part. So before we get started, let's talk about some safety guidelines. It's very important that you recognize that while there are many species of wild plants that are edible and completely safe for consumption by most people, if not all, and there's many plants out there that are safe for using as different forms of medicine, there are many plants out there that are poisonous, and we need to talk about that. And we also need to talk about it a little more in a nuanced way. But before we get started into the details, let's talk about where we don't want to be getting this food from. You never want to gather within 4 feet of an old house or building due to possible contaminants, including lead paint. You never want to gather in an industrial area, for example, near a factory, dump, gas station, etc. You never want to gather within approximately 30 feet of a highway. And if you have to go near a road, let it be the road less traveled. And if you are near a road, do harvest uphill of any road, if possible. You don't want to gather your wild plants or food from water or from land near the water that is visibly polluted and or smells bad. If it looks disgusting, smells disgusting, do not fish there. Do not get wild plants from there. Just leave it as it is. Don't even swim there. Don't gather near railroad tracks. Throughout the greater than a century, they have been spraying herbicides, pesticides, and other chemicals on there to keep the weeds down. But also, we're running heavy machinery called trains that are running on diesel, coal, and other forms of fuel that, of course, is going to be emitting exhaust, leaking fluids onto that land. And that can persist for a very long time, possibly a decade, maybe more. And so just skip those areas. And you don't want to gather any food from yards, fields, or areas that have been sprayed with chemicals. Do not spray your yard with chemicals if you plan on eating there. My yard has been chemical free for 4 years since I've moved here, and now I feel confident in eating the dandelions from my yard for the first time since I moved here. So I'm very excited about that. Again, when you are foraging, always properly identify a plant before you even touch it, let alone consume it. There's a lot of plants that will cause like a dermatitis, rashes, that go beyond just the poison ivy and the poison oak and the poison sumac. So we need to learn those, and we didn't know what we're touching before we're going out into the wild. And going out in the wild, that could be just going out into your yard too. We don't have to go too far away. We don't have to travel to an isolated, remote area to forage. These wild plants are growing throughout the region, even in cities. And everywhere you go, they will persist. They will grow on sidewalks. You will find these plants. And very key thing to keep in mind, we need to learn the proper way to harvest each plant that we choose to gather. If there's certain plants, we don't want to take the whole plant, maybe take a few leaves. If it is a certain type, we don't want to take too much. We don't gather more than a quarter of a particular type of the plant that we're gathering, especially if you're taking the root, because then it's not going to come back. We need to make sure that we're leaving enough for the plant to be able to proliferate, and we also need to make sure that we're leaving enough for the animals and for other people, and that we're leaving enough for ourselves whenever we want to come back and forage again. So be very mindful of that. Don't take any more than you need. And, because we have to consider others beyond just ourselves when we are walking through this world on a day-to-day basis. Another thing that's very, very important, watch where you walk. Don't be trampling on things. I see so many people when they're going and picking blackberries, and oh my gosh, you can tell they were there. They are just knocking everything down to get to the berries. And that is completely and utterly unacceptable. It's very disrespectful. And we need to respect the world that we live in, and we need to respect ourselves. And we can definitely do that. So keep those things in mind when you're out there. And we need to be mindful of the local laws and ordinances. If we're in a state forest or if we're in a park, we need to know what are the rules. Are we allowed to pick certain things? Are we allowed to pick berries, or is there restrictions on certain plants? Or does foraging require a permit? Then we need to make sure that if it does, that we're getting the proper permits and that we're following the actual rules that are there. Another thing that's very important is washing your forage food to kill any pathogens that may be present, especially if you're getting them from water. You can get a lot of different types of pathogens from water, from bacteria to different parasites. And you want to either make sure you're cooking them off or that you're cleaning them in some proper fashion to kill those. I will definitely eat some plants raw out in the wild without even thinking about it, like if it's chickweed, dandelions, I will do that, and I don't take it home and wash my dandelion flower. I'll just eat it. And the same thing holds, with like a nibble here, nibble there. But if I'm getting a large quantity, I do take it home and wash my greens before I consume them. So let's talk about some notes on wild plants. If you are looking at the taxonomy of plants, they are categorized into families. It's a higher taxonomy, but we'll start at that level, and then it goes down into genus and species and subspecies in some cases. But what we have to think about is families. Most families have both edible and poisonous species. So don't think that just because you learn a plant in a family that's edible, that's going to apply to all plants. That is not true in most cases. Some plants are safe to eat at certain phases of growth and toxic at other stages. This is nothing to be alarmed about. This is actually common for most plants that are growing, and even in the garden. An example of a wild edible that this is true for is pokeweed. Pokeweed is edible as a young shoot only. If it starts showing the signs of red or purple or pink, you don't want to eat it. It's actually likely going to make you throw up, and that's probably not what you want to do, unless, there's some reason that you would want to do that. But anyway, just keep those things in mind. It is a delicious green in the early spring, but you can't eat it once it grows to be taller, and the berries are also known to be poisonous as well. Certain parts of a particular plant may be safe for consumption, but other parts of the same plant may be toxic. Now, in the wild, we can look at May-apples as a really good example. You can eat the ripe fruit of May-apple, but all other parts are poisonous. Don't let this alarm you. You can't eat the leaves of a tomato plant, but most people can eat the fruit of a tomato. We won't get into the complexities of how nightshades are not good for all people, but just using that as an example, keeping in mind, I understand the controversy surrounding nightshades. Another thing to consider is that many wild edibles must be processed in some manner before consuming. And this is for reasons of taste and or safety. I mean, if you grow potatoes, you don't eat those raw because you need to cook those. And the same thing with a lot of the wild plants out there. Some of them have to be processed, some need to be cooked, some need to be soaked. Acorns need to be leached of the tannins before they're safe for consumption. And again, some foods may be eaten raw, but others must be cooked before they are safe to eat. Another key thing to note is that some plants should only be consumed in moderation. Don't let that alarm you. There's a lot of reasons for that. We should be eating a diverse diet anyway. We should be eating with the seasons, eating more locally, and then we would never really have to worry about over-consuming any one particular food. And there are plenty of wild plants out there that you can have nibbles here, nibbles there, and be just fine with it. Some plants may not be appropriate for those who have certain medical conditions. There are certain plants out there like Burdock that actually can help lower your glucose levels. So if someone has diabetes and they're on medication for that and they eat a lot of Burdock, that can actually lower their glucose in combination with the medication they're taking to a point that it would be a dangerous condition. So keep those things in mind. Also, there are certain plants like lemon balm that actually are good for someone who has a high overactive thyroid, but wouldn't necessarily be good for someone with a low functioning thyroid. And with being consuming plants in moderation, I think a good example would be basically all of the crucifers. Crucifers are known to be goitrogenic, which means that they interfere with thyroid function, and that's where the name goiter comes from. And they lower and inhibit the absorption of iodine. But that still doesn't mean we shouldn't go have some broccoli or eat some cabbage or some cauliflower. So we just need to make sure we're doing things in moderation and eating them in an appropriate manner. As stated, some plants may interact negatively with over-the-counter medications, herbal medications, and or pharmaceutical medications. So make sure you keep those things in mind. If you have any concerns, speak with your healthcare provider about these wild foods or the wild medicines before you use them. And we need to consider the possibility of food allergies or sensitivities. Many people are allergic to foods and that other people can eat all the time. I cannot eat hazelnuts. I am very allergic to those, and I could have a very serious, even possibly deadly reaction if I were to eat those. So I need to be very careful with any of the wild nuts that I eat that I'm not familiar. And that might be a very similar situation for someone who's listening to this talk today. I'd recommend doing a field edibility safety test before consuming any new wild food or plant medicine. When we were children, our parents gave us a little bit of food to try to see how we reacted to it. So do the same thing. Make sure that you're not allergic to it. And if you use this field edibility safety test, it will go through the steps of doing that. It's also something that can be employed in a survival situation. I will have a PDF copy of this on my website underneath this presentation that will be up there until July 1st as well. And this is just the handout that I gave out during the presentation. So let's get into a disclaimer. I, Tanya Bucci, am not responsible for any injuries or illnesses that result from your actions. You are responsible to do your own research and, most importantly, use your common sense. This information is brought to you solely as an educational guide with the best of intentions. It is imperative to always properly identify a plant before you even touch it, let alone consume it. Use this information along with quality field guides, other reliable sources, and or a knowledgeable forager to assist you. Okay, so before we get started, I know everyone probably wants to learn about some edible plants. Let's talk about some poisonous plants first. These are some things that you need to avoid before you get started. You need to be aware of them so you're not getting these confused. What we're looking at here in this field here is buttercup. Buttercup is poisonous. Please don't eat it. Now this here is fig buttercup, and it's an invasive. And unfortunately, you don't want to be eating this one, even though there is some historical evidence that it may have been used for food in the past. This is a big problem. It's overtaking. It's killing a lot of the native species. As you can see, it just thickly covers the ground and is nice mat. It's why it was brought here as an ornamental, and it is getting out of control. This plant is in the buttercup family. It's also known as lesser celandine or pilewort. We're going to talk about why that is one of its other names. It's non-native. You're going to see it flowering with these nice yellow flowers, typically from March to May. It grows all through the Washington, D.C. area and is definitely becoming a very, very big problem. As you see, it grows a very thick, dense mat on the ground, and it will take over and prevent anything else from growing. So the parts used, I wouldn't recommend any. It is a perennial, and it is invasive, so please never plant it. It does get out of control very easily. It's poisonous raw, and it's potentially fatal to grazing animals and livestock. All plants in the buttercup family contain a compound that is toxic, and that ingesting this toxin can cause nausea, vomiting, dizziness, spasms, and or paralysis. Contact with damaged or crushed leaves can cause itching, rashes, or blistering of the skin or mucosa. It is stated that the process of heating or drying turns this toxin to a safe compound, which is non-toxic and may have antispasmodic and analgesic properties. To be analgesic means that it's pain relieving or pain reducing. Now, there are alleged edible uses, though I'm not recommending any. The plant was ground for flour, boiled, and consumed as a vegetable. And again, with medicinal uses, it was used historically to treat hemorrhoids, which were also known, and still are, as piles. And I'm not recommending it for that. And again, when the herb was used medicinally, it was dried first, or it was extracted using heat. More common poisonous plants. These are some hemlocks, and you may think, oh, I'm speaking about the pine tree. Well, I'm not. I'm going to show you a picture of that. Pine trees are completely safe for consumption, at least the hemlock is, and white pine and red pine. But I digress a little bit. Let's stay on this. What we have growing around the eastern United States is we have poison hemlock, which is in a non-native. It is from more the Mediterranean region of Europe and North Africa. And you may be familiar with it because Socrates was alleged to have been poisoned with poison hemlock in his tea that he drank. And that is a poisonous plant that is deadly, in fact. But what is more deadly is the native water hemlocks. There's 4 species in North America, 3 of which are in the eastern United States. And this is an illustration of northern water hemlock. And the water hemlocks sound a lot less dangerous than poison hemlock. Unfortunately, they are more poisonous than poison hemlock. So be very careful. It doesn't take much to kill you. The root is definitely the strongest and most toxic part. They say that even just a bite of the root can actually kill an adult. The Iroquois referred to water hemlocks as suicide root. So be very mindful if you're out there looking for wild carrot or other roots. Do not get it confused with these plants. Wild carrot is in the same family, and the wild carrot root is white, very similar to the hemlock roots. The difference is there's many actually, but you would have to go out, in my opinion, with a qualified forager to actually see these in person, touch them, especially the carrot. It's a very distinctive feel. Use all of your senses when you're foraging: sight, smell, touch, and even in some cases sound. And you might think that sounds strange, but if you touch certain plants that have really rough leaves, you can kind of hear the sandpapery and feel that roughness to it. So keep those things in mind. I'm not going to cover wild carrot. It is covered in my ebook. If you're interested in getting that, you can get that on my website. There is a 50% discount, and I'll extend that until July 1st. If anybody has any issues, I understand a lot of people have a lot of financial issues at this time. Please reach out to me. I can make sure that you can get a complimentary copy of Volume 1. Okay, we're going to do some comparisons between spotted water hemlock and wild carrot. And on the left, we have spotted water hemlock, which is growing very close to where I live, and wild carrot grows everywhere as well. Both are in the same family, the Apiaceae family, and it contains, like, the water hemlocks are the deadliest native to North America. So these are very important to learn, and please do not take any chances. This is poison hemlock leaves on the left, and this is wild carrot on the right. They do look very similar. In time, once you get to know them, you can tell the difference, but especially for a new forager, it's hard for our eyes to kind of differentiate the little differences. It just takes a little bit of time and patience, but I believe that you can do it, and just take some practice. Okay, this is the hemlock tree. Like I said, it's completely safe and it's not the same. So when you hear about hemlock being poisonous, they are not speaking about this. They are speaking about the hemlock as the plant. Some other common poisonous plants that are in the nightshade family. We have about 3 or 4 species that are very, very, very common in this area, and we're going to highlight a few of those. We have gypsum weed, and this is known as devil's snare. Please do not consume this. It is completely a toxic plant, so just learn what it looks like and just appreciate the beauty and the complexity of this flower. Another poisonous plant in the nightshade family is known as Carolina horse nettle. This grows all over the Washington, D.C. area. Now here it's showing that it has a white flower. Sometimes it can actually look much more purple. So notice that in a lot of plants, there is a lot of variability in the colors of the flowers. So don't just learn it one way. And if you see it, with a different color, think that it's either something else, or, just make sure you understand. Just like in a family, there can be a lot of variability, in between different members of the family. The same thing can happen even within a plant species. Now this plant has thorns on it, and the little fruit looks like little tomatoes that turn to be a yellow-orange. And as you can see on the right-hand side, even the animals aren't touching that. That picture was taken December 31st in Virginia, and nothing is interested in eating the fruit of this plant. Another plant in the nightshade family that grows around here is known as bittersweet nightshade. This grows as it will appear to be growing like a vine. It'll grow along fences, and it is a very common plant and very interesting, and it's definitely going to have the more purple flowers as you see here, and then the fruit is going to turn all red. You might encounter it where the fruit is actually, they'll have the green fruit, the red fruit, and the orange fruit all on the same plant. And there's a picture coming up showing that. You'll see what the leaves look like. And like I said, very, very common. There's no thorns on this plant, unlike the Carolina horse nettle. But don't let that make you think that it's safe, because it is not. Another word of caution with respect to this plant: it will grow like a vine, and it'll intertwine with other plants. So if you're out there picking leaves of another plant, be very mindful if this plant is growing nearby that you are actually getting leaves or the fruit of the plant that you want, and not accidentally intermixing them with this. Okay, and again, here's a picture showing the unripe and the ripe fruit on the same stem. Now this is poison ivy, possibly poison oak. They look very similar. What's interesting about the poison ivy is it can come as a vine that can grow super thick and climb up trees, and it can last for years. And it can also be like a little shrub, and it can be a low growing plant on the ground. So you can encounter it in multiple different ways. Also be very cautious of burning that. It actually can get into your lungs. The oil, the urushiol, is a volatile essential oil, and it can go airborne. If you mow it, and if it's a fresh plant, it actually can give you a rash just from actually walking through a freshly mowed area. I know it happened to me last year, and be very cautious about, I had just taken a shower, and so my skin was completely bare of, your natural protection and oils, and had gone for a walk right after they had mowed that day. And I have never had poison ivy as bad as I did last summer, to the point that I actually had to go to urgent care. So be very careful, learn this plant, and do not forage near it. Also, don't take for granted that you may have been exposed to it in the past and it didn't cause much of a reaction, and that'll carry through, because that's not true. I've never had a reaction like I did last summer, and you can, depending on the amount, have a very serious reaction to it. These are just more pictures of it. You can see when it has the little flowers and the fruits on it. It's quite a beautiful plant, and lots of variability in the leaves. Poison ivy is more common on the East Coast, and then poison oak, which is a little more common in the West. But you can see both. Just assume that it's poison ivy or poison oak and stay away from it. There's also poison sumac to be concerned with as well, but that is not in this presentation, and that has white berries. So don't confuse that with the red staghorn sumac or the red smooth sumac, which are not poisonous. Okay, another common poisonous plant is Virginia creeper. This is in the Virginia creeper or the grapevine family. And you might see this growing. It can be low growing. It can grow up the side of houses, telephone poles. And again, this is one to be careful if you are foraging for other plants, because this will climb and climb and climb and climb. It has almost like little hands. It's definitely a great one to actually examine, because, and they will kind of stick onto things and climb and, you know, intertwine around. This will have beautiful red leaves in the fall. It'll have the green berries until they turn a beautiful blue. Of course, they're on red stems. These are not blueberries. Do not eat these. This is actually a plant that does cause dermatitis for some people who touch it. So don't consume it, don't touch it, and be aware of it. Next up is we have ragweed. Ragweed is a very big problem. It causes hay fever and seasonal allergies. So if you're a sufferer of those, this is a good one to learn. A lot of times, people don't even see this one. It is so small with green flowers that it really doesn't get much attention. So when they have hay fever and they're sneezing everywhere, they may see goldenrod and think, whoa, that's what's causing my allergies. Goldenrod most likely is not. It's the ragweed that's on the left that's actually responsible for the pollen that is causing the allergies. Goldenrod, there's many species that grow in this area. It's a great medicinal plant. You can make nice teas out of it. You can infuse the flowers in an oil and make, you know, salves and other type of at-home oils for the skin. And you can also eat that if need be. Another species of ragweed is known as giant ragweed. It looks nothing like the annual or common ragweed, but they are very similar, and both are going to cause the seasonal allergies that many people suffer. This is the plant that we had talked about earlier, and this is pokeweed, and it's known by a lot of different names: pokeberry, pokeroot, Virginia poke, etc., or simply poke. And the berries are poisonous for consumption, but you can use these as ink. You can use them for dyeing, and they're completely safe. So they're safe to the touch. You can play with them, just don't eat them. And this is also the plant that you can consume when it's a young shoot before it gets any of the pinks or purple streaks in it. Also, it does have some medicinal uses, but that goes beyond the scope of this presentation. Another plant to be aware of is called moonseed, and this looks very similar to grapes. So we have a lot of wild grapes growing in the region, but you need to be aware that there is the moonseed out there, because you do not want to consume this. It is a poisonous plant, and the berries look very similar to wild grapes, and the leaves kind of do too. So you wouldn't want to be confusing these if you were trying to harvest grape leaves and make, you know, some sort of dish with grape leaves. Now, there's some differences between wild grapes and moonseed. Moonseed has no tendrils. Tendrils are what you can see on the right-hand side, those little things, those forked tendrils that are coming out. And wild grapes use those tendrils for being able to clasp onto things so it can grow and have something to hold on to, because it is a vine. And moonseed has a crescent-shaped seed, which is why it's called moonseed. And it is a single seed inside that berry or inside that fruit. Now, wild grapes have round seeds, and often there's 2 to 3 seeds. So you're looking at multiple seeds versus a single seed. But, you know, just be very, very careful. Learn the differences. They do look different once you see moonseed, and once you see wild grape, you know, you touch the leaves, you'll be able to learn the difference and in the future and feel confident that you're getting wild grapes and not moonseed. This is a species of wild grape that you may encounter. It's the riverbank grape, also known as frost grape. It's used to make homemade jellies, jams, wines, And of course, fresh fruit. This is the frost grape, which is a different species. And this is just where it's important to note that it is, I think, very imperative to learn the botanical names of the plants so you can make sure that, you know, when you're looking at the local or the colloquial name or the common name, you know, there's a lot of this multiple plants with the same name, and there will be one plant and it'll have 10 different names depending on what region you're in or who you're talking to. So I tried to give a lot of the, you know, also known as, to kind of help, you know, with clarify that a little bit. Porcelain berry is very common in the Washington, D.C. area. It's in the grapevine or Virginia creeper family, just like grapes are. And the leaves look very, very similar. How you can tell if you are out there foraging, whether it was wild grapes or porcelain berry, is actually you could cut the stem. Grapes are going to have a brown or a tan pith. That's going to be the inside of the stem. And porcelain berry is going to have a white pith. Now, you may think, well, is this a poisonous plant? And the answer is no. You can eat the berries. I've eaten a lot of them. They taste like absolutely nothing. They're so bland, but they're so beautiful. As you can see, you just have these lavender, blue, pink berries that are they're just beautiful. But they don't really taste like much. The birds will eat them. They're nice to see, and they're not going to hurt you. So this is going to conclude the section on poisonous plants. Keep in mind there are many other noxious and poisonous plants out there. And just in this picture, we have, of course, the buttercup in the upper left-hand corner. We have Viper's bug gloss. That's the blue flowers with the red spots. And then on the right, we have what's known as virgin's bower. It's very, that's one you don't want to touch. Actually can cause a lot of irritation, especially if you touch your nose or your mouth afterwards. It can cause quite a rash. So definitely learn as many of the poisonous plants as possible when you're out foraging. Always keep in mind if you're learning a new edible plant, always ask the question, is there any poisonous lookalikes that you need to be aware of? I mean, I forage all the time. I eat lots of wild foods. It is definitely, learning about the poisonous plants isn't meant to scare you. It's just meant so you're more aware and you're more knowledgeable about everything so you can be safe in what you do. Okay, so now we finally get to talk about some edible plants. So let's talk about the most common one, dandelion. Dandelions are pretty much everywhere. They are non-native. They are in the Asteraceae family, also commonly known as the aster, daisy, or sunflower family. Dandelions are going to actually flower. You can see them in early March and throughout, and they will continue to flower throughout the summer and into early fall. And let's talk about the parts that you can eat. Dandelions, you can eat everything. You can eat the leaves, the flowers, the roots. The seeds would be not palatable. Those are those little seed balls that, you know, you can blow balls and blow the seeds everywhere with the little kind of the seeds on the parachute. But regardless of which, it's a safe plant for, I would pretty much say, nearly everybody. It's a perennial, so you can pick the leaves and it's going to keep coming back as long as you don't take too many of them. And typically, dandelions are going to be growing like very low growing to about 18 inches tall. The leaves are very nutritious. You can eat them raw as a salad green. You can steam them, saute them. You can juice them, put them in your smoothies and your blender. The roots can be boiled as a vegetable, or you could roast them up, whatever works for you. The roots are also very good as a coffee substitute. You roast them and then you grind them up. You can do that with chicory as well. And chicory isn't in this presentation, but it is in my ebook and it's on my website, and it has a blue flower. And what it means whenever it's a coffee substitute, we need a little clarification. There is absolutely no caffeine in dandelion, no caffeine in chicory, but it has a similar taste and smell, like the depth with the roasting of it. And it does serve well as kind of, if you're trying to get off coffee, is to give her that similar taste that you would get. Also, if you would like to lower the caffeine in your coffee, you could actually mix a proportion of dandelion with coffee, and then that would give you a lower caffeinated version of your coffee. If you've ever been to New Orleans, they actually have what's known as New Orleans coffee, and that's a combination of roasted chicory root and coffee. So they did that because back in the day, a lot of the population was poor and they couldn't afford a lot of coffee. So they would extend their coffee by mixing it with the roasted chicory root. And there's times when they couldn't afford any coffee, so all they had was the roasted chicory root. But anyway, it's very delicious, and actually roasted chicory is very nutritious for you. It actually has sedating properties and can be cleansing to the body. But back on the dandelions, the flowers can be eaten. You can actually take the flower heads of the yellow flower and taking as much of the bract, which is the green portion where it attaches off, because that's a little bitter, and you can dip it into like a cornmeal type of batter, and you can mix that even with water, just cornmeal and water, very basic, fry in some sort of fat, whether that's a coconut oil or butter, or if you're out in the wild and you do eat meat, you can do it in some tallow, which is beef or deer fat. You can also eat them raw. They're, I nibble on them and they're very, I don't know, they just kind of like a little bit of a happiness because of the bright yellowness as far as I'm concerned. The flowers can also be made into wine. You may have heard of dandelion wine, very common for people to make that. Dandelion is also best known for its medicinal uses. What you can do with that is the leaves. They serve as a diuretic. They help stimulate the appetite. That's why throughout the centuries we have come to have as a very regular occurrence is we eat salads before our meals. That's because our ancestors knew that eating bitter greens, whether they knew, they didn't need a scientific research study to do it. We are, as humans, very intelligent, and we can, deduce these things without actually going through, some sort of lab setting. And anyway, by eating these leaves, then when you're eating your bitter greens, they do stimulate your appetite. They do engage the bowel production, and that'll help with your digestion, because we need your gallbladders to be working properly to make sure we're properly digesting all of our food and breaking it down in a manner that we can assimilate all of the nutrients and maximize the nutrients from our food. So the flowers, they have a lot of antioxidant properties, so eating those is very nutritious. I'm sure frying them is kind of reduces that a little bit. So keep those things in mind, as fried foods really aren't exactly the healthiest. It's always better to eat food as the least amount of processing as possible is most often a good rule of thumb. But that doesn't hold true for everything. Anyway, the root, if you can use it as a decoction or making a tincture. So what is a decoction? What that is if you take the root and you boil it, it's going to be a longer boil than if you were just making like a tea or steeping something, like something more gentle like leaves or flower heads. So the roots are a little tougher, so they do need a little longer time to get that medicine out to be extracted. But another good way for using the root, if you want to use it for medicine, is an alcohol-based tincture. So alcohol actually is a very good solvent for breaking down the medicinal qualities and properties and extracting those into a liquid. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll be posting a video presentation on that shortly in the coming weeks. So the root is very detoxifying, especially to the liver and the gallbladder. But other uses that you can use is you can, of course, use the leaves as a poultice. But you can use the stems. It has a white, milky latex, and this latex is very good for treating warts and skin eruptions. And also, you can use that milky latex as a glue. So if you are out in the wild, you don't have any glue sticks or, Elmer's glue or super glue. I doubt that the dandelion latex is going to work as well as super glue, but it can maybe work for, applications that are not going to need a very strong adhesion. Another thing about dandelions is they're very high in vitamin A and C. They're loaded with iron, magnesium. It's a good source of calcium. So if you're having nutritional deficiencies or anemia, dandelion leaves are really going to be very beneficial, very good nutrition. So before we conclude with dandelions, I just want to show you that there's actually a similar looking plant out there, and that's on the left-hand side. That is not a dandelion, although it's in the same family as the dandelions. It's actually known as cat's ear. And this one actually is hairy cat's ear. There is a smooth cat's ear that is also pretty common as well. And there are some differences. One, the leaves look different, and of course the hairy cat's ear is going to have hair on it, whereas dandelion is smooth. And dandelion on the stem is going to have one flower head. When you're dealing with with cat's ear, you're going to have a stem that's going to branch off and have multiple flower heads on it. So that's a very key identifier. And though you can't tell the difference between the flowers in this picture, the next one is going to show you a close-up of the flowers of both of these, and it's very easy to see the difference. If you're familiar with chicory, the flower on the left-hand side, cat's ear, does look very similar in structure to a chicory flower, though chicory is going to be blue, or more specifically cornflower blue, also known as cornflower. On this side, we have the hairy cat's ear on the left, so you see all those stems coming out, and you can even see in the one that it's also branching. Dandelion, you're not going to see that. Okay, here's an illustration of both of these. And a little bit about cat's ear. Both the smooth and hairy are edible. Of course, the smooth is going to taste better if you're eating it raw because it's not going to have the hairs on them, which make it less palatable. Also, hairy cat's ear is known to be more bitter than smooth cat's ear. The leaves still can be eaten like dandelions. Of course, you can just eat them raw. You can steam them, saute them, put them in your smoothies. Smooth cat's ear, like stated, is hairless and milder tasting. So it's a better choice for eating raw or on your sandwiches. But both are completely edible and safe to eat. Now, cat's ear, both of them have similar medicinal properties. You know, it's going to help aid in digestion, liver support, kidney support, and with detoxification to dandelions, but it's going to be milder in action. And you might think, well, why would I want the one that's lesser in action, not as strong? Well, maybe depending on who you are, maybe you're a child or elderly or have a weaker constitution, and you need to have a more gentle detoxification, then this may be a better option. And like dandelion and chicory, the root can be roasted and ground to make a coffee substitute. Another plant that is very similar looking to the dandelion is coltsfoot. Coltsfoot is also non-native, but you will find it growing a lot of places. It flowers early. You can find it sometimes even in late February, but it's flowering right now, March, April, and in some places into May. What you'll see with this plant that makes it very interesting, as you can see on the left-hand side, there are no leaves that you can see. It's only the flower. The flower comes up first, then the flower dies off, then the leaves will be present. So it's very unusual in that aspect, because most oftentimes we're used to seeing the flowers first, then, or not the flowers, the leaves first rather, then the plant will flower. And this is quite different. As you can see in this, there's hair on it. The stems actually aren't smooth. It has little leaves that are coming off and it almost looks like scales. You can see that in this picture in the center and also in illustration. And this is also, whenever it goes to seed, is going to have a similar looking seed ball, puff ball that you would see with a dandelion. Now here are coltsfoot's leaves, and this is where the name for this plant comes from, is because the leaves are said to look like coltsfoot. They are rounded. They're going to be white and slightly fuzzy on the underside. And as you can tell in the picture on the right, you can see that stem does have some noticeable hairs on it. Okay, coltsfoot. It's a perennial. Parts use leaves and flowers. We are going to start with some cautions on this one. You'll read maybe here on other videos that coltsfoot is edible, and it's not. It's edible in the fact that you could eat it today, you're not going to get sick, not going to do anything to you. It's not going to make you sick tomorrow. But what happens is it is now known that this plant contains toxic alkaloids that not only can you absorb them through your skin, especially if it's broken, but they can be easily absorbed through your stomach, and they actually have potential to increase the risk of fatal liver toxicity. I don't know how much that is. Maybe for some people it would be a smaller amount. It is not worth taking your chances on. Research is also suggesting that this plant has cancer-causing compounds. That would mean it's carcinogenic. We do not need more cancer-causing compounds in our lives. We have enough from the world that we're living in right now. And according to Mountain Rose Herbs, you can actually get it there. It's not for internal use and do not apply to broken or unbraided skin. Do not use when nursing or pregnant. Okay, my thought is there's so many other plants out there that are safe for use topically and internally for consumption that this is not the one that needs to be used. It has been used in the past, but that was before people knew about the toxicity of this plant to the liver and also for its potential to cause cancer. Historically, the leaves were dried and smoked and thought it was to relieve asthma. It was used medicinally, the leaves and the flowers, and it was for respiratory problems, and it was also used to treat diarrhea. It was used topically for insect bites, burns, and inflammations. But there's great plants out there like plantain is one of the best things that you can use on your skin for those type of conditions, and you don't have to worry about any toxic alkaloids. Of course, with treating things like diarrhea, there's a lot of plants out there that are astringent that are going to help with that you don't need to do this. And there's lots of plants out there that you can smoke that are, I'm not encouraging people to smoke anything, but there are plenty of plants that you can smoke, like mullein leaves, like clovers, etc. Wild lettuce, for example, is another one that you can smoke, and it's going to have medicinal benefits that you don't need to actually have this as part of a smoking blend. Okay. Burdock is a very common plant. It's also a non-native, but it's well established around, but kind of has found a good balance in North America. You're going to see that burdock flowers July through September, but that's only if it's in its second year. It is a biennial. It's also in the same family with dandelions. See, there's going to be a lot of plants that we'll be covering in this presentation that are in that same family. As you can see here on the slide, on the left-hand side, it's the first year, and that's a very small little leaf, maybe 5 inches, and just kind of sprouting up there. And then the one in the center is a picture of the second year, and it gets very tall. 4 feet, 5 feet is not uncommon to see this plant. And what you'll see is it'll have a central stalk and it'll bolt up, and then it'll end up flowering. We're going to see some pictures of those flowers. And then what is most maybe familiar to some of you watching this video is the burrs that actually are on this. And they're those things that stick to you like Velcro, and they're said to have been the inspiration for inventing Velcro. And another thing that's interesting about this plant, it's called burdock. I've heard that the reason it got that name, and I'm not saying this is true or not, is that people used to wrap their butter in it because the leaves are incredibly large. And burr is definitely how you say butter in French. But again, I'm not sure if that's true. I know that there's other plants that you can wrap your butter in, like broadleaf dock as well, which is safe to do. So here's just some other things. This is the first year. As you can see, some of the first leaves growing on the left-hand side. And then as you see that and throughout the summer, the leaves are going to get bigger, and you're going to have a pretty large rosette, low growing on the ground. But that is a pretty sizable plant. And what we have here is the second year, as you see that it's going to bolt up, and those leaves are absolutely huge. I mean, easily a foot, the long ones down there, which make it great for a lot of reasons. If you're out in the wild and you need a plate and you don't have one, well, you can use those leaves. If you don't have a pouch or a little container to put your berries in, you could actually make something out of this plant, and that would be completely safe to do. This plant is absolutely completely safe as long as you're not allergic to it. I don't know anybody that is, but sure, there's someone out there. As you can see with this plant, there's a few different varieties, like subspecies. You have the one with the white flowers over in the right-hand side, and purple flower is definitely the most common. And if you see where it first starts out, the little things will be green, and then when it goes to seeds, it's going to turn a brown. Now, those things will stick to you, but they will not hurt you. Alrighty, so how do we use burdock besides a few things we've talked about? You can use the leaves, the roots, the seeds. It can go from typically 2 to 7 feet. 2 is going to be on the low end the first year. It's going to be a low-growing rosette, and it can get to be up to 7 feet in some of the, especially the greater burdock. But typically seeing it, maybe 4 or 5 feet is going to be more common. Edible uses, the taproot. And what I mean by taproot, a carrot is a taproot. So just don't be too alarmed by some of the terminology. Many people have eaten many taproots in their lives. So the best time to get the taproot is going to be the end of the first year. And what you want to do is get it at the first hard frost. Get it about a week after that. The reason being is because throughout the summer and into the fall, what those leaves are doing, they have the chlorophyll. They're getting the energy from the sun, and the leaves are storing and creating all that energy. Now, once that frost comes, it tells the plant it's time to actually take all that energy that has been gotten from the sun and from the nutrients and everything that has going on through its first part of its growing cycle, and it needs to actually move that energy down into the root, because it needs to store that energy, the sugars and all of its nutrients there for the winter, because then it's going to, once spring happens and things warm up, the root is going to have all the energy, the sugar and the carbohydrates and the nutrients, and it's going to use that to produce the second year plant, where it's going to bolt up and it's going to produce flowers, which in turn is going to produce the seeds, and then from there this plant is going to be able to proliferate. So you want to get that. If you're going and get the taproot whenever you're seeing that plant that has the flowers on it, you are going to be not very impressed by the taste of it. It's going to be fibrous, it's going to be bland, lack flavor, maybe be even off-putting in taste. But if you get that taproot at the end of the first year after the hard frost, you're going to get something that's absolutely delicious. It is very common to eat this in a lot of Asian cuisine, especially Japanese. You can find burdock actually for purchase at a lot of like health food stores or specialty stores in the produce section. And how you would eat it, you can eat it raw, you can julienne it, and you can put it in, salads as kind of a garnish, just like you would carrots. You could juice it, you can blend it, roast it, saute it. Any way that you could think about doing carrots, you could do with burdock. But another way that you could also eat it is the immature flower stalks. So in the second year, it's still not too late to eat it. You just don't want the taproot. You want those flower stalks. But you want to get them before they go into the flowering stage, because they're still going to have the energy. The energy's now going to be in that stalk. You can peel the stalks. You can eat raw. You can juice them, steam them, boil them in salt water. The leaves can be juiced and blended or steamed. They can make a great wrap for cooking fish or to use as a plate in the wild, or, a makeshift bag if you need to carry some berries or something like that you were able to forage. Burdock is an excellent edible, but the one thing is we have to think about it. Our food really is our medicine. So this is a great one that you're eating, and it's going to give you a lot of medicinal benefits. So let's talk about some of those. But we'll talk about some of the ways this can be used topically as well. This plant has great antioxidant, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory properties. The leaves, you can use it as a poultice or a wash. A poultice is actually where you just take the leaves and you crush them up. If you wanted to do it that way, you could either do it with like a, what do they call those things? A mortar and pestle. Or you can actually do it by making a spit poultice. That's very common for plantain, is you just chew up some of the leaves in your mouth and then apply it to the wound. And that's definitely something you might have to do if you are out in the wild and you do get cut. And it sounds kind of, people might think that is kind of gross to use your spit poultice, but it's actually your own fluids mixing with the plant properties to put on your own body in an open wound. So, it's not really that gross. Anyway, the poultice or using as a wash, like taking the leaves and then breaking them up in a water and being able to use that, is going to help with dry skin, acne, psoriasis, minor burns, and eczema. Again, if you have like wounds and stuff out in the, when you're outside, as far as like bee stings and cuts and things, plantain is going to be a better option. If you're bleeding, yarrow is going to be a better option if you can get it, because that helps stop bleeding. Anyway, back to burdock. The root is a powerful diuretic. It is also diaphoretic. That means it induces sweating, and it's blood purifying. We need to cleanse our blood. We need to keep those toxins out. We do eat a lot of bad food typically in America and throughout the Western world. So you need to help kind of eliminate those. Burdock helps support liver and kidney health, and it also helps with gout, which would make sense because there's definitely a relationship to kidney health and also one having gout. It's also very detoxifying. It's part of one of the 4 herbs that's used in a Essiac tea blend. It's used with slippery elm, sheep sorrel, and depending on who you ask, it's either Indian rhubarb or Turkey rhubarb. Doesn't matter. We're not going to get into which one was the original one. Doesn't matter. Anyway, Essiac tea has a long history of being used as an anti-cancer treatment. I'm not making any claims saying that is or isn't. I don't truly know. I do make Essiac tea and I drink it occasionally. It tastes delicious, and whether or not it is a use for cancer, that is not for me to say. All right, so now we're going to look at docks. Docks are not in the same family as burdock, but they do have some similar uses, and so we'll definitely kind of think to the burdock whenever we're talking about the docks, because they're, like I said, going to be used in a similar fashion. Docks are biennial as well. They are native, and so they're only going to flower in April through July, but of the second year of the plant. It's not going to flower in the first year, similar to burdock that we just discussed. So we have curly, which is also known as yellow dock, and then we have broadleaf dock. They are in the same genus. We would say that yellow dock I think is pretty agreed upon that it is definitely the more medicinal of the two, but both of them are going to have medicinal properties, and both of them are going to be edible in a similar fashion. Of course, they are in the same family, which is known as the smartweed buckwheat family, and is also known as the knotweed family. Okay, in the first year, as stated, it is going to be a low-growing rosette, and it is not going to flower. And when we're dealing with this plant, similar to burdock, we are going to be wanting to get the root at the end of the first year when it's in the rosette. If we wait until the second year, which we are looking at here, that energy and the medicine and all the nutrients that we would be hoping to get from that root are actually going to be now in those little flowers that are growing and going into those leaves, and then it's actually going to be so we can be producing very healthy seeds so it can proliferate into the future. The one thing to note is when you're looking at curly or yellow dock, look at the thinness of the leaves. They're much more narrow than broadleaf dock, and they call it curly dock because there's waviness to the margins of those leaves that you're not going to see to that extent in broadleaf dock. It's going to be a little more smooth on the margins, less wavy. And of course, you're going to notice that with broadleaf dock, the leaves are just much more broad. Okay, so you see the flowers on these. It's going to be very similar looking flowers on both of these plants. And they're both going to turn to the same kind of rusty brown, reddish brown that you will see once fall comes. You'll see it all over the place. And you may be familiar with some of this. It's very beautiful. And there on the right hand side is some of the seeds that I had collected a few years ago. And you can grind that up and use that as a flower extender. And one thing I forgot to say about burdock, and I do want to say, is they actually use the seeds for making burr oil, and that has been another use for burdock seeds, and I'm sorry that I forgot to mention that. Okay, back to the docks. Again, we're going to use the leaves, the roots, the seeds, and it grows 1 to 5 feet It's going to be low growing in the first year, and then it's going to bolt up into a taller plant in the second year. The edible uses: the leaves spring and new leaves through midsummer. They get a little dry and bristly later on, so you want to kind of get them when they're fresh and unfurling. You want to steam them, have them as a sauteed green, or maybe as a pot herb is preferred over the raw. These leaves are high in oxalic acid, and we don't want to eat too much of that. That could actually lead to the formation of like kidney stones for some individuals. Don't be too concerned about that. Spinach also is extremely high in oxalic acid, so sometimes it's good to have that lightly steamed as well. The fresh leaves are best as it dries out fast, as stated. If eating raw, please combine with like onions, lemon juice, because of the vitamin C in those, and it's going to actually help it be more nutritious. The same thing with eating spinach. It's better to pair that with something high in vitamin C because of the iron content. Non-heme iron is more absorbable if you're eating it with a food that has a vitamin C content. That's why spinach pairs well with like little tomatoes, or why like a spinach and strawberry salad is really delicious, or spinach and onions, because those do pair well together, and you are going to get maximum benefit from the nutrients in the food in certain pairings. Okay, the seeds, they can be dried and ground, and they're a high fiber flour extender. They're not a replacer, but they can help make your flour last a little longer, especially in times of need or famine, or if you just want a little more high fiber in your diet. Medicinally, again, we can use this as a poultice. It'll help soothe burns, blisters, and nettle stings. We're going to talk more about stinging nettles as a plant a little bit later on. The roots, especially curly or yellow dock, remember they're the same plant. They're high in calcium and iron, and plants that are high in iron are going to help with those suffering from anemia. The roots are also high in magnesium and phosphorus. The thing with curly dock, why it's actually better, the roots are yellow, and that's indicative of the iron content that you're not going to see in the broadleaf dock. And the roots, especially the curly or the yellow dock, it's going to have very good cleansing properties, blood purification, and it's going to help tonify the gallbladder and the liver. It's a very calming herb, and it is known to be diuretic. It's known to help with menstrual issues. Potentially increases fertility, and a large amount is going to have a laxative effect. And that is not unusual with some of the plants that are detoxifying to the body. Whenever the body starts detoxifying, it will want to release those toxins, and typically will have a laxative effect. Curly dock pairs well with red clover, dandelion, and or burdock, and they all have similar detoxifying actions, but they're all a little bit different, so they do work well together in a synergistic fashion. Okay, this is the plantain that was spoken about, and here there's two species that are very common. Both are non-native. They were introduced allegedly by the early settlers who brought this plant as a medicinal herb, and allegedly this plant, especially the one on the left, the broadleaf or common plantain, was known as white man's foot. Allegedly the Native Americans used to be able to tell where the white men had been because this plant would follow them where they had gone. And on the right, it's called narrow leaf plantain, also known as English plantain or ribwort. And we have the broadleaf here. This is an illustration. If you look close, the flowers are extremely small, and you'll see those seed pods on there. Something to note about plantain, if you notice the name of the genus, it's Plantago. And for the broadleaf, it's Plantago major, and for the narrow leaf, it's Plantago lanceolate. And forgive my pronunciations. You may have heard of psyllium, which is a high fiber supplement that people often consume for helping with, elimination. And what this is, it's actually from the same genus. That is actually from the related species, very closely related species known as Plantago psyllium. And this can be used in lieu of that because it does have a lot of fiber in the seeds, and you can dry those out and use them in a similar fashion as psyllium. Okay, and this is just some examples of the pictures of the narrow leaf. It grows much taller than the broad leaf, but you will see them often growing in the same type of areas, and very beautiful, very small little flowers. And you can use all parts of this plant, and we're going to talk about some of the ways this plant can be utilized, especially for medicinal purposes. So speaking about the edible, all above ground parts are edible. You can eat the young leaves. They become a little fibrous because, as the one is called ribwort, it's because the veins are so pronounced, and those are some tough little veins coming through there. You can actually pull them apart and actually extract those veins out of there, and they have been used for bushcraft purposes, even making sutures in emergency purposes in the wild. So the young leaves, you can eat them as it like stated, a salad green, juice them, blend them, steam them, saute them, add them to soups. Older leaves can be juiced or blended because they do become a little tough and a little fibrous. The seeds and flowers, you can dry them and grind them into a high fiber flower extender. But medicinally, this is where this shines. The leaves are very, very amazing as far as treating topical injuries, wounds, insect bites, poison ivy, stings, boils, sores, allegedly snake bites. I mean, I guess in a pinch you could use it, but please seek medical attention as soon as possible. Also, the leaves are known to be antibacterial, antiparasitic, antimicrobial, antihistamine, demulcent, expectorant. Of course, demulcent and expectorant, that means you have to consume them internally for that purpose and as a diuretic. The leaves are also astringent, and they help stop bleeding, but not as good as yarrow. And they're anti-diarrheal because, again, it's an astringent plant. But if you did have internal bleeding, this would be a good option as well. And especially if you didn't have yarrow around, because it doesn't exactly grow as commonly around as plantain does. So the seeds and the flowers, they are mucilaginous, and mucilaginous is kind of like, if you think about okra, it's going to be very smooth. It's going to serve as a thickening agent in soups and stews rather. And if you're going to have teas and stuff of this or eat this, it's going to be very soothing to the body. It's going to help lubricate their gastrointestinal tract. It's going to soothe sore throats, and it does help form a bulk forming laxative similar to psyllium. Next up, Dame's Rocket. This is a non-native, and it is becoming rather invasive. You'll see this growing April through June. It is a very common sight, very beautiful. The flowers are going to range from like a pale lilac to a deep purple to even a white. You'll see when you see these leaves, they have a little bit of hair on the stems and hair on the leaves. Quite a beautiful plant, but it is a little invasive. So you'd be doing the world a favor if you were to eat more of this one. It's also known as Mother of the Evening and Night Scented Gillflower. I don't know if that's gillflower or gillflower, so forgive my pronunciation on that. And anyway, the reason is because it's supposed to smell better in the evening and not supposed to have much of a scent during the day. I've never actually tested that theory, though I see it all the time. I'm going to have to do that this year. Okay, a thing to note about this, it also has a common name is Sweet Rocket. This plant is in the crucifer family, so you're going to find yellow rocket growing around, which is wad edible. And it's also the same family as broccoli, cabbage, where you're going to get your horseradish. We're going to talk about garlic mustard later, which is also in the same family. All of these are, of course, edible. And there's going to be no toxic parts of these. You can eat the leaves, the seeds. You can eat these flower heads before they form. You can cut them off and saute those up with a little bit of fat of your choice, coconut oil or butter, and put a little bit of salt, maybe a little garlic on it, and be very delicious. As you can see here, we do have quite a variability in the coloring of the flowers, and like many of the plants in the crucifers, you're going to get what their name is from, and you're going to have 4 petals, and it's going to be in a cross faction. So as you see here, we're going to see that later in with the garlic mustard, and the field mustard you may encounter, which is not in this presentation, is going to have yellow flowers. All right, this is the first year of the Dame's Rocket shown here. And on the left-hand side, then you're going to see where it's growing, going to seed. And you can use those seeds just like you would any mustard plant. Mustard greens are actually in the same family as well. And this family is commonly called the mustard family. So edible uses as discussed: leaves, stems, flowers. They're a great addition to your salads, sandwiches, steam, saute them, juice them, blend them. The flower buds before they start to flower, you can take about 4 or 5 inches from the plant top, saute them with the butter and salt. Remember, this isn't invasive, so if you're not letting it go to seed, you're not harming the environment. You actually might be doing the environment a favor. The seeds you can use to flavor food similar to the cultivated mustard plant. And you can also sprout them. A lot of the seeds that we have in the mustard family, like broccoli seeds, you sprout those. It actually has been proven that they help with detoxification and they are anti-tumor. So that is possibly something that may be an interest to you. And they are also antibacterial. Again, the note that I mentioned earlier, plants in the crucifer family are goitrogenic. They disrupt thyroid function because they interfere with iodine uptake. So if you want to help mitigate that, you can eat one raw in moderation. Maybe you can steam them. That's going to help lower that goitrogenic effect. But you can also eat with seaweed, maybe a little sprinkle of dulse, a little sprinkle of kelp. That has such a high amount of iodine that it's going to help offset the goitrogenic effect. Okay? And if you have questions on what kelp and dulse are, please reach out to me. I can definitely share that information, of course, with you. My channel is called I Love Iodine for a reason, and you can read more about that if you're interested on my website as well. And just a note before we move on from this plant can grow up to about 3 feet, and you'll often see it growing in sunny areas and open fields, basically disturbed areas where it can take a hold and move right in. And you'll see it along highways, and you'll see it along bike trails and things of that nature. It's becoming more common over the last few years for sure. Okay, now we're going to talk about the clovers. So everybody might be familiar with white clover. It seems to grow pretty much everywhere as a low ground cover. And what we have here is there's a lot of varieties of white clover. So this one is just talking about the Dutch clover, Ladino clover, and they're all in the pea family, legume family, the bean family. I am not a botanist, so I'm not going to get into the minutia of what would differentiate some of the different varieties of the white clover. They can be used pretty much in a similar fashion. This is also where you're going to find your 4-leaf clovers if you're lucky, and in some cases, like somebody that I know actually has found a 5-leaf clover last year, and possibly even a 6. I have to try to recall if that was the case or not. And we do have video of that, and so it's definitely provable of true. An interesting thing about the clover is the bees really, really love it, and that's where we get our clover honey from. So it's a good idea. If we want to save the bees, let the clover be. It's a nice low-growing plant. It would serve us better to have a yard full of clover than a yard full of grass, which we can't do much with because we're not cows. We can't digest it. Whereas the clover, we can actually do a better job of digesting it, and we'll explain how. We can eat some parts of the grass, but that's a whole other story for another time. Of course, you're familiar with wheatgrass. You just need to juice it, and you can also pull apart the little thin rib vein. I guess we are talking about it now from that, and eat that from the grass. This is some picture where you can see the markings on the white clover, the little white markings that form a triangle between the 3 leaves. It's also how I've learned that you can find the 4-leaf clover is don't look for a triangle, look for a square. And if you start looking for that, you might have a better chance of finding a 4-leaf clover. And as you see, it grows in a nice little colony, and it is a nice low growing ground cover. I guess the one downside, if there were a lot of bees, you might not want to walk barefoot out there because you certainly don't want to get stung, and you don't want to step on any bees. Okay, so how can we consume white clover? Clovers are very high in protein, and they are very abundant, so that's a very good thing. You can use the flower heads, and you can use the whole plant. The size is going to be like 4 inches to 10 inches, depending on the species. Some are a little bit taller than others. It is a perennial, so it's going to keep coming back year after year. And I maybe haven't covered this yet in this presentation: an annual, biennial, and perennial. Annual is once per year. A biennial is a plant that takes 2 years, and a perennial is something that's going to be greater than 2 years. There's also what's known as a short-lived perennial, which might be 3 or 4 years. And then, of course, a perennial could maybe be, last a decade, or more. Okay. So one thing to note about clovers is they're not easy for humans to digest raw. They're much easier for cows because they have the multi-chambered stomach. You can overcome this by steaming or gently boiling for 5 or 10 minutes. But an easy way you can do it is you can soak it in a good quality salt, 1 tablespoon per quart of filtered water for several hours. That's going to help break down the cellular structure of the plant matter, and you're going to be able to consume it, and it's going to be more digestible for you, and you'll be able to assimilate the nutrients and the amino acids better. You want to collect before flowering the leaves for best flavor in soups and stews. But of course, once we have the flowers, you can get those dried flower heads, or you can actually use them in tea or eat them raw. But if you have the dried flower heads and seed pods, you can be grinding them into a nutritious flower extender. It's not really going to be a flower per se, like if you think about a wheat flour, but it's going to be something that might be best mixing with other types of ground grains or ground plants. So medicinally, the flowers may be smoked as an herbal alternative to tobacco. We'll find that we can do that with red clover as well, and that's been used as a way for people to quit smoking if they're trying to eliminate tobacco. So the flowers, you can use them as an infusion. We spoke a little bit earlier about decoctions. An infusion is going to be a tea, but what you're going to do here is you're either going to use nearly boiling water, or in some cases boiling water. I think it's always a better idea to go with letting it come to a boil and letting it cool for a few minutes before putting it over delicate flowers. You also want to cover those, but we're going to talk about the exact way to make a nice tea from clovers in a little bit. And it is this flower, the white clover, making a tea or using the extract. You could use a tincture or something of that nature that's made with the clovers. It's good for coughs, colds, flus, especially if accompanied by a fever. It's also been used to help treat rheumatism and gout, and it's claimed that it has cancer preventative and antioxidant properties. White clover is very good at killing intestinal worms. And if you want to learn more about how to kill parasites, please check out my website. I have actually had a very serious tapeworm infection, and I definitely know a lot about parasitic infections as a result. The nice thing about white clover, in contrast to red clover, it has a low content of phytoestrogens. We're going to talk a little bit more about phytoestrogens when we talk about red clover. Okay, so here's red clover. As you see with red clover, the leaves are going to be bigger. It's actually quite a difference in plant. It's going to grow more like a plant rather than a low growing kind of ground cover. And it looks pink, purple if you will, than red, but that is what the name is. And of course this is in the pea legume bean family, however you want to call it. And as you see, the markings on this plant are very pronounced. Those white triangles are going to be very very V-shaped, and not all of them will have it, but you will see, like, when it first starts growing it won't, and the older leaves will have it more pronounced. Okay, these are just some other pictures, and here it has it on this species very pronounced, and it's a new leaf. So you may see it, you might not, but you definitely will see it hopefully on the plant. And this is a close-up of the flower head, and you can see it's just basically a collection of a whole bunch of little flowers there. These are some additional pictures of it. So how we use it, it's going to be similar to the edible uses of the white clover. You can toss some of the raw flower heads into a salad for a great nutrient boost. It's high in protein, very abundant. Again, not easy for humans to digest raw, but you can steam it, gently boil it 5-10 minutes, or you can soak it in salt water, or do both. And good quality salt is very important, and you want to put that in filtered water as well, because it will absorb some of the water, of course. And medicinally, the flowers are smoked as an herbal alternative to tobacco. Again, claimed to be helpful in quitting smoking. The flowers, you can use it as a tea, like we spoke before, and how we refer to it as an infusion or an extract. It's this red clover more so than white clover. It's known as a blood purifier and detoxifier. It also has anticoagulant properties, and that means it helps prevent blood clotting, and it lowers LDL. LDL is one of the components of cholesterol that's supposed to be deemed the bad cholesterol. You can get into more of a deeper study on cholesterol and really what that means, and I think the way things are presented in the simplistic fashion, which they are, is actually a disservice to us, and I think we need to have a better understanding of what cholesterol is and what it does in the body. It's actually necessary for the body, and your body produces it, and it produces it for a reason, and it's not something you want to actually eliminate completely. So if you want to learn more about that, reach out to me. There are some great places I can send you where you can actually learn more about it that know a lot more than I do. But I think that's something that everybody needs to learn a little bit more about. Anyway, back to the red clover. It is claimed to have anti-cancer benefits against each endometrial cancer and antioxidant properties. It has high content of phytoestrogens, and those are compounds in it that mimic estrogen. They're known as plant estrogens. Soy is a plant that has a lot of phytoestrogens. So if you are consuming a lot of soy, you may want to check a little bit more into some of the dangers of consuming too much soy. We're not going to get into that, but there's a lot of resources out there on why consuming a lot of soy isn't the best idea. And whereas if you did eat it or consume it, you would want it in a fermented form like natto, or for good for quality fermented soy sauce, or sprouted soybeans before you're actually consuming them. But again, that could be a whole video in itself. So the thing with the phytoestrogens, it's also, because of it being high in phytoestrogens, it's used for hot flashes and PMS, and it helps maintain healthy estrogen levels during and after menopause. And that can help prevent osteoporosis, or the osteopenia, which is when you're not quite to the level of osteoporosis. It also may limit the development of benign prostate hyperplasia in men. Red clover serves as a diuretic and helps improve blood circulation. You can make salves with red clover and poultices, and that can be used to help treat psoriasis, eczema, and other skin conditions. And red clover, like white clover, is a perennial. So how do you make red or white clover tea? This is going to be a similar fashion on how you make a lot of herbal teas. And this we would be calling an infusion and not a decoction. And I guess in a word of, for the purist out there, this isn't even tea. Tea actually is a plant, and actually you get what we make our black tea from. Of course, green tea is going to be a tea that hasn't gone through a certain phase. So that actually is technically tea. If you're doing an herbal type of thing, they call it a tisane. Let's not get into the whole technical thing, but just know that there is, kind of differences. If you're getting into herbalism, you would refer to it as that. And of course, if it's a thing, as what we're dealing with here would be an infusion. If you were kind of boiling, such as a root, you would call that a decoction. But anyway, thought that was kind of important to say. Anyway, if you're going to do this, take 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried flower heads, or 3 fresh flower heads to 8 ounces of hot, just not boiling water. Bring it to a boil, let it cool off for a few minutes. Maybe 180 degrees would be sufficient. Cover and steep it for about 30 minutes. And you can have a couple cups a day as you like, depending on if you did have a sickness. Maybe you would want to go with the white clover if you were trying to do some detoxification. Or if you had issues where you wanted to have the estrogen, you could go with the red clover. I've had both. Both are great. And I prefer to have them cooked as a tea rather than eating red or white clovers raw. And I definitely would warn against that. I think it's better to actually make sure that you're cooking these or soaking them in salt water.